Nerds, I've got Patrick from abstract.us. You might be wondering, what is abstract.us? It is technology that's involved with legislation, but we're going to go into it in detail with Patrick, the CEO. But before, let's warm it up with Andrew. Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Welcome, Patrick, to the show. How are you doing?
Good. No, happy to be on here.
I love it. Yeah. So, as many of the audience knows, I work on a nonprofit called ofthepeople.us, and one of our volunteers, Lucas, said, "Hey, are you familiar with Patrick and what he's doing?" And I said, "No, we should connect." And then I said, "Well, it would be we can kill two birds with one stone if we do it over the Nerds for Humanity podcast. This way, I can get to know Abstract more. We can trade notes about Abstract and OTP." And then the audience can get to know what you're up to as well. So appreciate you carving out time on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Before we get into Abstract, tell us a little bit about yourself, like your background and how you ended up running the company.
Yeah, no, and again, thank you for having me over this morning. So, quick background on my end. So my family's from Argentina, but I was born and raised here inland LA, so like Walnut, Diamond Bar area, if anyone's been there before. And long story made short, I studied electrical engineering at Loyola Marymount University. Even though I started off doing film production, then went to engineering, and I guess I took the dark side, or I guess it depends how you look at it, but the dark side towards politics and business. And so my two other co-founders, Mohammed and Matthew. Mohammed, he's actually from Kuwait. And so I met him through electrical engineering, and Matthew's a longtime friend that I guess I've known him for too long, since we were like 5 years old. And his parents are of Taiwanese descent, and he's spent 5-6 years in B2B marketing and design.
Here's the team.
Yeah,
Patrick, Matthew, and Muhammad.
that's
It's a
us.
classic melting pot story, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when did the idea of starting Abstract come about?
So this is actually the kind of funny part. So it actually started off with a conversation I was having with a friend of mine about the Green New Deal that
Mhm.
Congresswoman AOC introduced. I want to say it's like 2.5 years ago. And so in that conversation, my friend was saying, "Oh, she's trying to ban every single airplane ever. There's going to be no more airlines. Like, I don't know how this is gonna work out." And I said, "Wait a second, this sounds a little bit um, far-fetched."
Mm.
So I searched up the bill that Congresswoman AOC wrote. I read the entire Green New Deal, and there's
Wow.
no mention of airplanes at all.
Right.
And that's where I realized, okay, one, this is a terrible experience. And two, how is this information, how is this data not more accessible and easier to understand? Because these are the bills that are turning into codes and laws that govern
Hmm.
businesses, individuals, etc. And so after that experience, I went to Mo and Matt and said, "Hey, um, this is very frustrating." And I think there's something that we can do to solve this issue. And so we previously had always had conversations about politics, and um, always showed that sense of I guess pursuing that pure democracy. Right, that was the
Hmm.
reason why our families immigrated here
Hmm.
to escape uh, their corrupt governments.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's where the genesis of Abstract came from. Was that conversation?
Yeah. And how far along are you in the development?
Yeah, well, we've there's been a lot that's happened in the past 2 years. So We're now a team of 10 people. We have a full working pilot version of Abstract. We have 55 organizations and 90 users. So mostly the people using our product are lobbyists, nonprofits that are tracking policy or doing advocacy, like chambers of commerce, grassroots, etc. And then we have a couple of corporations as well using our product.
And it's a for-profit enterprise.
Yeah, so we are a C corporation, we are for profit, but we are working with a lot of nonprofits. And I always like to clarify, we don't sell to government, we sell to people that are trying to advocate or influence government.
Yeah. And so like as an example, let's say that a lot of the audience for this show is big into universal basic income. And then now with Yang's kind of focus on open primaries, legislation around probably at the state level around supporting more open primaries or ranked choice voting. How might a nonprofit that let's say the Forward Party that cares about this kind of thing, how would they use Abstract?
So the way they'd use Abstract, and for reference, we are starting off just with California state legislation, and then slowly we're expanding to actually quickly now because we just closed our second round of funding, which we can touch on that later. Thank you. But essentially, there's a couple ways of going about it. So if you care about UBI, you can just search for that directly, and we'll do a full bill text search, keyword search, account for synonyms, etc. for all the bills that have come out, not only this year, but also going back to 1989. So we're the first place that you can do a search like that, which sounds crazy, but that's just how archaic these systems are. And so one, you can search for it. Two, you can also set up a keyword alert. So if you care about UBI, you can say, hey, I care about UBI. I also care about, name X tax, right, type of topic. We will then alert you anytime a new bill comes out that may be impacting that topic. So those are the two ways you can stay up to date.
Very cool. So it's almost like a Google News alert for legislation.
Yes, with collaborative tools built on top of it. Because once you find a bill you care about, there's a lot of insights that we've pulled from it as well. So we're able to pull who supports or opposes the bill. We can also pull other small piece of metadata that I can talk about later. But then you can say, hey, I care about this. I want to annotate this bill. So I can then pick lines to talk about. I can leave my comments. I can then share that if I'm a nonprofit. I can share that with my members. I can make a public board, so a live link that I can put on my website. Or if I'm a lobbyist, I can print out all the bills I'm tracking for my clients. So there's various ways to collaborate and share my work with a network of other people.
So what's it like raising money for a startup that targets such a unique area? This is not your classic crypto startup or ed tech or something like that. It's kind of a unique niche.
Yeah, so I mean, funding's been insane as it always is. One, because of how niche our industry is, but two, also because we're first-time founders, right? So we actually did start this out of college. So we actually just hit we hit $2 million in total funding last week, which was kind of insane for us.
Nice.
Thank you. And so the way we've approached it is just surrounding ourselves with people that come from different areas, but are all passionate about our mission, which is increasing government transparency. So ultimately, our mission is to be the gateway to understanding government data, whether it's bills, regulations, etc. So that mission has been core to our fundraising process. And then really the big piece is just making a narrative around, okay, this is the traction we have with these lobbyists and nonprofits. How can this scale to be $1 billion business? And so that's been key to how we've been able to fundraise, which actually AOC's former chief of staff is one of our investors now, which is kind of funny.
Nice.
In full circle. Yeah.
Love it. So tell me a little bit about how do people solve this problem today? Like, how does a interested party track like this whole infrastructure debate that's going on right now? Like, I'm able to read about it in the news, and I get these little summaries
Yep.
from a journalist. It's like, oh, there's a discussion about Joe Manchin doesn't want to have,
Yep.
the environmental stuff or climate change stuff, but I actually don't have any visibility into the actual bill. And I guess it's still in this draft stage. So how does that work in an abstract world?
Yeah. So I always like explain the high level in that the way the bill system works, right, is all the bills are introduced at the beginning, at least in California. They're introduced at the beginning of the year. So there's roughly 4,000 bills that are introduced in January. Between January and October, 4,000 bills go through various committees and they are voted on various times, go through various revisions. So out of that, there's like about three versions each for each bill.
Mm-hmm.
So like 12,000 documents that are in the
Mm,
ether. So right now, if you want to track and understand what's going on, most people are doing is using the old government website to either one, check every single bill that's coming out, or two, use their like limited search capability to find bills that might affect what they care about. And then they're using Excel sheets to keep track of the updates
mm.
that are occurring with the votes and the new versions that are coming out.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
So it's a very manual process. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It also sounds like one of those things where if you are like in the oil and gas industry, you could probably afford to have a team of lawyers doing all of that Excel
Yeah.
tracking and paralegals and whatever. But if you're like a modestly funded nonprofit that just cares about, the environment, you may not have a funding to have a team of
Exactly.
legislative trackers or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the ways in which we see ourselves making lobbying more accessible is
Right.
giving
Leveling the
these
playing
powerful
field a
tools.
little bit.
Yes.
Hmm.
Exactly.
And what do you think will be the cost? I don't know. Maybe you're still finalizing it, but just like ballpark, is this, what's it cost to get into this?
Yeah, great question. So for our pilots, which if there's anyone in the audience that would like to join our pilot program, we'll be running that until the end of the year. But they will be receiving a special discount of $600 for the first year, and then thereafter, we're actually developing the pricing tier right now. So we're
Hmm.
conducting surveys with the 55 organizations we're working with to see how can we price the different tiers. So I think it's going to go anywhere from like 600 to 2,000, $5,000 per year, depending on the tool sets
Hmm.
and the support we provide.
Got it. Got it. Well, if you ever have a special rate for YouTubers who talk about politics,
Yeah,
who want to
that's
track stuff, I can provide clear attribution, but
yeah,
might be a little modest on my budget. But that's great to hear. I mean, I could imagine if you have a financial interest in this legislation, which will be lots of industries and
yeah,
constantly, like that should be almost like a no-brainer ROI for them, right?
yeah. No, it's actually
Yeah.
it's very much underselling the
Yeah.
ROI
Yeah.
for them. But like you said, there's a lot of people who would benefit from this,
Yeah.
but like $1,000 a year doesn't make as much sense for them. However, at the same time, what's really interesting about this is we're building a network. So with every person that joins Abstract, we're able to know, okay, what industry do they care about, what bills are they tracking, etc.
Mhm.
And we're able to connect them with other people that care about, say, UBI. So if there's a bill that comes out that they
Yeah.
all support, they can co-sign a letter to support that UBI bill, which right now
Mhm.
that's impossible. There's no such thing as a network around policy and bills.
Yeah.
And so we want to be mindful of making sure Joe Schmo or like cuckoos don't hop onto that network. And so right now we're doing that with that pricing to ensure we just have organizations on board. But
Love it.
something we're figuring out.
Yeah, maybe there's also like a student version or researcher version.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep, yep, yep.
that's awesome. What do you think will be the biggest challenges facing abstract? I mean, it sounds like a great idea. Why hasn't it already been done?
Yeah, so I would say there's two pretty big challenges. One is data. So uh, a lot of PDFs, a lot of Word docs that are just out there in massive zip files.
Hmm.
So one of the biggest challenges has been building a set of scrapers and algorithms that automatically take these PDFs, these documents, and extract the text, and then
Hmm.
take all the core pieces and structure it in our database. And so that's been um, that's been one of the challenges, but we've completed that already for California. And so what's the second part is going to be scaling that. So if we want to go to another state, like
Hmm.
doing that 50 times, what is that going to look like? Or
Yeah.
going down to the local level, the cities and counties, what is that going to look like? So we have a couple of tricks up our sleeves, but those are some of the things we're thinking about.
It reminds me of during the Obamacare debates, there were always people on the kind of opposing side of that initiative saying, "Hey, read the bill." And it was an interesting kind of like uh, very effective kind of rhetorical tool
Hmm.
because it was thousands of pages, like every bill is.
Hmm.
And I'm guessing that the Democrats could have yelled that during the Trump tax reform, saying, read the bill." Like nobody reads the
Yeah.
bill.
No, they don't. They don't.
And the closest thing I've heard is like, well, you have your legislative aides divided into like 30-page or 50-page sections, and then each person takes a
Yes.
section kind of thing. Yeah.
And the way it's being written right now is even more bonkers because it starts off as let's say in California, Senator
Mhm.
Josh Newman wants to write a bill on healthcare. So
Mhm.
his legislative director, chief of staff, they come up with some bullet points, but they're not
Yeah.
experts in healthcare. They've never worked in healthcare. So then they reach out to some of the people they know in healthcare, maybe a lobbyist or two, and then
Mhm.
they draft up points using that feedback. Those points are then emailed using, and then they write that in Microsoft Word. They email that to Legislative Council, which is a group of lawyers in the Capitol. And then
Mhm.
those lawyers take the bullet points and write the bill themselves.
Mm.
And then they email it back to the legislative office, and then they just check to see, oh, okay, does this make sense? But
Mm.
oftentimes they're not experts in law,
Yeah.
which is ironic. Um, and so it's just such a broken process. We're not we're not like working on the drafting
Mhm.
portion of it yet, but we do want
Mhm.
to get to that piece as well because we start tracking the bills after they've been introduced.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if there are legislators who have advocated for things, and the thing that comes out of that sausage making process is sort of lost in this multi-step translation process
Yep.
where it's
Yep,
like,
yep, yep.
"Oh, you ran on whatever, like climate change, and then you advocated for this bill, and the thing that came out of it, because there were so many parties involved, and you weren't tracking it end to end, you actually have now put in stuff that you didn't even realize,
Yes.
and that's just kind of
And
disturbing. Yeah.
if you want to hear something crazy,
Mm.
what's a common practice in policy making is called gut and amend. So, uh, and I'm not even talking about like large bills. These are like maybe a couple pages.
Mm.
So a bill can be talking about gun rights, and then after a committee hearing and a new version comes out, it maintains that same title that has to do with gun rights, but the body of the bill talks about abortion. And so the content of the bill has been gutted and amended. And so that
Mhm.
happens like all the time. And the only way to detect that before abstract was to check every single bill that comes out and compare all the versions and see, oh, does
Right.
this new version still talk about the same subject, right? Regardless of the
Mhm.
title. So we actually built an algorithm using AI that is able to compare every single version of each bill and flag the bills that have changed the subject matter that they're talking about and tell us, hey,
Mm.
it's been gutted and amended. So again, another example of how we're making that process more transparent and yeah, making it more accessible.
Would you ever see a world where the government should actually just fund this abstract service and as a sort of public service to the voters and in the spirit of more transparency, or how did you think about the business model?
That's actually the first time I've heard uh, that take. Um, I've not thought about that. The way I've always seen the business model is we charge an annual subscription,
Mhm.
and it's a standard software SaaS business.
Mhm.
And so with that subscription, we have various tiers, and we price differently versus whether it's an enterprise or a base plan. But once we branch out into making more tool sets for government, I think government contracts and
Mhm.
partnerships could become a thing. But that's definitely more in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like maybe there's an abstract basic that the state of California says, we just think it's in the interest of democracy for people to have more visibility. And so we've contracted with Abstract to provide this alerting service.
Yep,
And they're nonpartisan. They're just going to tell you what changed and let you track what
yep,
you're interested in. And then there's Abstract Premium or Enterprise where the lobbyists can get all these advanced features, and that's fine. But why it feels like almost a public good. Like, why doesn't every voter have access to this? Because they're not all going to be able to pay,
yeah, of course.
$600 or whatever.
So now you're touching on to our whole final vision thing. So
Mm,
yeah, so our whole thing is we want to make this accessible to every business owner and every individual. It's just a matter of making sure we protect that network and figuring out, we don't want to just open the floodgates to everyone because that will introduce a lot of noise
mm-hmm,
um, in the platform. But that's definitely the path we want to take it towards. And on top of that, I think what excites me the most is um, one of the core things we're focusing on is understanding how laws and codes work. So how does the structure of the law actually impact different industries and impact different fiscal policies, right? So if a bill like SB 116 comes out, which that came out like 2 years ago, that Senate bill allocated $6 billion to broadband businesses. So the way you understand that is you have to see, okay, Senate Bill 116 is trying to change X portion of the law. And so the algorithm would have to understand, okay, if this bill passes, it would have X effect on X industry, right?
mm-hmm,
And so that's something that we're actually in the process of trying to automate. And if we're able to do that, then we make it much easier for the everyday person to understand how bills are affecting whatever topic area they care about. Like if I care about climate, we will be able to tell you all the bills are coming out, how it's going to affect the law and their personal life, and then how they can sign the letter. So again, that's more looking to the future. That's something we want to get to.
yeah. When you start thinking about predicting or measuring or projecting impact, I guess that's where it will be kind of tricky to the extent that um you suggest, oh well, this is going to affect the climate, and then the fossil fuel companies may say, no, 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 it won't, and there's no benefit to these wind farms, and they cause cancer, or they kill too many birds, or whatever. Like, there's always these debates.
Oh
How do you
yeah,
think you'll navigate kind of impact projection? Because I could imagine it would be a lot of
yeah,
different
yeah.
vested interests.
So, well, that's one of the beautiful things about abstract is that these conversations are not happening in echo chambers like Facebook, right?
Hmm.
Or name X social media. If there are conversations that are to be had, it's right next to the bill and right next to the section in the platform that shows how the bill is amending the law. So already at that point, it's much harder to come up with bullshit like the conversation I had originally where they said AOC was trying to ban all airplanes
Hmm. Right.
because imagine having that conversation next to the bill. It's like, no, well, obviously it didn't mention that. And then if you're
Hmm.
able to see how it's impacting the law and code, it's usually pretty clear cut as long as you have um, the structure defined in terms of how the bill is going to be impacting the law.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine some of the debates that we currently have being perhaps way more grounded in the reality of what the bill actually says.
Yes.
And it's okay if people have disagreements, but if they can then highlight, like, well, here's maybe there's someone that says, oh, well, I know they don't say the word airplane, but they talk about whatever, carbon tax or something,
Right.
and that's why it impacts airplanes or whatever. At
Yep.
least it's now grounded and sort of anchored into the legislation versus like kind of hyperbole.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
it's right there. The
Yeah.
conversations are happening right next to the source of truth.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. We're gonna I have some more questions, and folks in the audience, feel free to put them in the chat. Before we get into the Q&A and sort of further discussion, I do want to take a quick commercial break to thank some of the sponsors of this channel who make us possible, and those are the Nerds for Humanity members. So let me just give some quick shout outs. First of all, we have Soldier One, the highest level, VP level, senior VP level. So thank you, Soldier One, for all your support covering the costs of this podcast. And then we have the VP level. We have Kristen Slevin, Laura Lane, and Bike Bike. Thank you to our VPs. And then Hardcore, we have Mike, Gene, David, DK, Jekka Lego, Kirsch, Mr. History, Byram, Mona, Susan, Yang, Tony, Robert, Dean, Stat Nerd, Galessa, Jay Perrin, AA, Jay Bryan, Vivian, Donna, Flavio, Yoda, Jason, and Parth. And then I will scroll through our verified nerds. Thank you very much to all of you. As you can see on the screen, everybody helps contribute to the podcast hosting costs, the streaming software, and other operating costs for this channel and make it possible. So look at all these verified nerds out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will give a shout out, especially to our youngest nerds, the least time as a member. We have Finney Helps and H3 Simp, less than a month old. The next thing I do want to give a shout out to is the Of the People nonprofit, which is how Patrick and I got connected through our shared contact, Lucas. So right now, OTP, Of the People, is kind of like a Yelp for political candidates. And I wanted to highlight some of our all-time most approval voted candidates. This is a new sorting mechanism. We previously talked about the trending ones, the most recent approval votes. This is all time. So I'm just going to shout out the top 5. Ali Dalzimer, Austin Searle, Luron Hubbard, Sass, and Shervin Azami. So those are the top 5. And just as a heads up, in early November, I'm going to have a panel discussion with the top 5 most approval voted candidates on OTP. And we're going to have all of them live and you can get to know them better. And if you haven't already, go to ofthepeople.us and you can vote up whoever you are supporting. And if you don't see your favorite candidate there, it's free for them to list themselves. Just ask them to create an OTP profile. It takes about 2 minutes. So back to our conversation, Patrick. Tell me a little bit about what it's been like raising the money. Like,
Oh yeah.
how's that gone? Are there VCs that focus on this space, or do you find like how's that gone?
Yeah, so these are all fantastic questions. So there's actually very few VCs in this space. And in particular, if you look at the gov tech space, we don't actually match that model too closely because usually gov tech
Mm,
startups are selling some type of software to government.
right.
And so they're working with contracts. It's very different.
Hmm.
We are, I guess, truly unique in that we are working with people who want to influence or advocate for things around government.
Hmm.
But we're more of a B2B at least right now, in that we're selling to other businesses. We're a B2B software company. So um, what's been really core to all this is the whole data piece and the collaboration piece. So the venture capitalists who invested in our company um, either have a focus on data, because a big part of what we're doing is taking all this unstructured, messy
Mm-hmm.
data, bills, regulations, all that fun stuff, and we're taking all that with our algorithms, structuring it, making sense of it, driving insights, and then using AI to make again sense of all that. And so data's been one focus, um, and the other one is VCs that are interested in collaborative tools. So again, big part of what we're doing is this collaboration, like the annotations on the bills, being able to comment with your teammates,
Mm-hmm.
and build a network around that. So those are the two focuses that we've been able to leverage for venture capitalists.
Awesome. And what are you most excited about in terms of the future of abstract? Like where do you think the big wins are going to be?
Yeah, so another great question. um, One is I'm excited about becoming the premier source of like legislative truth, so to speak, in
Mm,
California. So just from our pilots, we know that there is no other solution that is better than what we have to not only find but understand and work with bills in California. So I'm really excited to take that and not only apply it to California but across states and the federal level. We're actually right now expanding to the major counties and cities. So we're adding Los Angeles and San Francisco, and there's actually nothing at that level. So at the city and county level, it's just absolute chaos.
mm,
If you want to know what's going on with healthcare in Los Angeles, there's like 5 different websites that you have to check, and they have like very little infrastructure in place. So that's one of the things that excites me. High level, I think what drives our whole team is that end goal, that end vision of becoming that gateway to understanding government. And if you think about it, we're actually redefining how democracy works. Because until now, the way people would understand what their politician, their elected official, was doing
mm-hmm.
was to essentially vote them into office and then kind of rely on them to make bills aligned with their values and what they care about. But since the inception of our country, like most constituents, most of us individuals have no idea what the fuck is going on
Mm-hmm.
um, with the bills that our elected officials are creating and passing. And so if we suddenly create, with the use of technology, this platform that makes it really easy for anyone to understand what their elected officials are working on and what the impact is on their business or their individual lives, suddenly there's this clarity around the policy that's being made, and suddenly we have much more power to vote more intelligently, which should improve our democracy as a whole. So that's, I think, what really
Yeah.
drives our company as a whole.
And I could see why Lucas and I thought this would be an interesting topic given our work on OTP, because I think what you're talking about is more competition, more accountability for
Yes,
elected officials. And OTP, we're about more new entrants, more people challenging incumbents and holding people accountable. And in a way, it's kind of like small businesses before Yelp. Like nobody really knew who was a good plumber. Like maybe you get a
yeah,
recommendation from a neighbor, but
yeah,
then when the plumber knows, like, oh, if I screw this person over, I might get a bunch of 1-star reviews, or these people over. Um, Everybody's more on their toes, and
exactly,
these incumbents right now, they're not on their toes, right? They, especially if they have the big donor list and they say the right things. I mean, I get communications from my representative regularly, and they say they're doing all this great stuff, but like I don't really know, to be honest, what they're doing.
exactly.
They're saying
And
the
what
right words, the right
yeah what
buzzwords. Yeah.
what if the bills they're working on have been gutted and amended, and you have no
Yeah.
idea? They say they're working on some abortion bill, and it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And then also, yeah, at the local level, right? What's happening at the city and
Yeah.
county versus the state? Yeah,
And the other thing would be, I would love to then see what my representative's view of this bill is. Like, what does she think of this infrastructure bill? Other than saying she supports it. Like, where is she pushing and advocating for our district? And where does she think where does she have the biggest concerns? Like, there we can't have that conversation uh because we don't have access to the information, and there's no tool to kind of allow us to say, like, well, what do you think about
exactly.
this section of the bill? So it's awesome that you're doing that. Uh, tell me a little bit about how, let's say, if folks who are watching this are really interested in what you're doing, are you guys hiring, or like, people might out there
Yeah.
might want to work on this?
Well, so we're actually closing a round in the next 2 weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
um, super grateful for all the people who've helped us so far. So now we have a lot of fresh capital, where we will be expanding our team. So we are going to be looking to add 2 engineers to
Mm-hmm.
the team. So if anyone knows any front end, back end engineers, Ruby on Rails, React, hit me up. And then also thinking of potentially adding somebody in the sales marketing side of things. And then always interested to talk to people who read bills for fun or care
Mm-hmm.
about this stuff, whether it's a hobby or full-time work, because as we start expanding, there's going to be a possibility of us generating our own reports and our own
Mm-hmm.
insights and publishing, um, almost have not having our own publication, but publishing our own insights.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, the other day with our algorithm, we detected all the bills that Facebook opposes and supports, and we found out that all the bills that they oppose have to do with housing, for
Hmm.
residents. And so that is something that, again, we're unearthing with all the data that we've structured. And so, again, anyone that cares about this, always happy to talk with them. And I guess I can just share my email
Sure.
if that's
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah, so it's Pat at abstract.us. So pretty simple, just Pat at abstract.us.
Wonderful. Anything else that we didn't hit, Pat, that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Um, I think we covered mostly everything, uh, although there's so much. But I would say the biggest piece of this is, building. I think the biggest misconception that people have is that for-profit companies can only be evil. Almost, like, I know I've come across a lot of people that way, but I think there's been a huge push towards, like, responsible, like, truly ESG for-profit companies that are leveraging that growth to, like,
Mm-hmm.
actually change society. Um, and that's, again, also core to what we do. Uh, so yeah, just keep on pushing with the mission of increasing government transparency.
Love it, Patrick. Well, best of luck to you, man. So folks, check out abstract.us. If you work at a nonprofit, or if you have friends that work in a nonprofit, or you work in private industry that has an interest in tracking and influencing and providing input to legislation, sounds like a really very high impact tool, and a great solution to a problem that we've been dealing with for decades, and maybe now's the time.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we can have you back on, and
Yeah,
really enjoyed the conversation, Patrick.
absolutely. Thank you again, Tom.
Love it. With that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.